Mailbox video. Let's continue.
In September of 2020, Emily found a notice on her front door. She was being evicted.
In April, I lost my job due to COVID, so I'm waiting on unemployment. I can't pay. I'm a mother of a 5-month-old, and then the eviction date came. Sorry. It was a really, really, really scary time.
Since the pandemic took millions of U.S. jobs in March and April, most workers who make more than $20 an hour have been able to keep working or have returned to work. But low-wage workers, the people most likely to be renters.
Okay, Jesus. This is because people who tend to have higher wages tend to be more important. And I know that sounds horrible, but it tends to be like this, right? Jesus. It tends to be that they are more heads of companies or managers or people that, let's take massive corporation, cannot, live without, or if they did, they would need to do serious restructuring, which right now they can't do because of, pandemic and things like that.
Instead of homeowners are also the least likely to have gotten their jobs back.
But, again, that getting your jobs back, well, that's expendable because, well, they're just some low employee, and hey, we can just, get rid of them, we can hire new ones.
Which means that many have started to lose their homes.
They showed me some paper and it said, y'all got 30 minutes to get out.
This is my check, but I ain't making it with $300.
Their stroller now carries their possessions.
I have a roof over my head, but I don't know how long that's going to be.
America is in an eviction crisis in the middle of a pandemic, but
wow, who could have guessed?
Also in the middle of an election. So, what can the U.S. do about it?
Don't say basic income. Don't say that.
Even before COVID, the U.S. had a much higher eviction rate than similar countries.
You could also say because we have more drug use, which drugs are expensive because they're illegal, and, well, that creates a market for that, but okay.
40 renters in the U.S. have been evicted at some point.
That's a misleading statistic because 1 in 40 at some point. It could literally be from some motel where they got drunk and accidentally fell asleep on the floor, or it could be from their $1 million mansion and now they have a new $1 million mansion. That doesn't mean 1 in 40 evicted right now. So 1 in 40 just means evicted from the house sometime. It doesn't mean that they currently are homeless.
Compared to 1 in 89 in the UK, 1 in 227 in Denmark, and 1 in 25,000 in France.
What a lot of people don't realize is that we were already in the midst of a housing crisis before COVID.
And you can support bringing rent down by decreasing zoning laws. While that may decrease your backyard space, it will make your rent go down, so you choose.
19 hit the United States.
Aliza Durana collects data on evictions for a Princeton University research project called the Eviction Lab.
When we think about difficulty in finding an affordable place to live, one factor is that wages have stagnated for the last several.
And this is because of
decades.
Since 2001.
Don't say increasing the minimum wage, because when Bernie Sanders, who was a huge proponent of that, had to increase his minimum wage to all of his employees of 5 minutes, he just cut their hours to make, well, they may be working for $15 an hour, they were working overall less.
Rents across the U.S. have soared.
And this is because of the 2008 housing crisis and economic collapse and people losing their job.
But the average household income has barely increased at all. This gap represents millions of Americans struggling.
Oh, let's see. 2001. Fine. Let's look at 2000. They completely skipped 2000. The hell? It goes 2001, 2002, 2003, 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, 2018, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, 2014. What? What the hell? They have 2018 in the middle of the graph for no apparent reason. What?
Struggling to pay rent, and that was before they lost their jobs. When the pandemic hit the UK, France, Denmark, and many similar countries, their national governments kept workers afloat while businesses were closed by directly paying everyone a portion of
And this led to increased taxes.
their salary. In the US, Congress approved temporary extra unemployment money back in March. In some states, Republican lawmakers made that money really hard to get. But for those who got it,
Like, being unemployed.
that money made it possible for people who've been laid off to keep paying their rent. Then in July, the payments stopped. Without that extra cash, lots of unemployed people couldn't pay their rent, and landlords across the country started filing evictions. Over the next few months, Democrats in Congress kept trying to pass extra relief, and Republicans kept saying no. In September, amid damaging headlines and sinking poll numbers, President Trump asked the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to issue a temporary halt in residential evictions. But it wasn't quite that simple. For the order to
How was it?
protect you from being evicted, you had to fill out a form, certifying under penalty of perjury that you tried to get government assistance and make partial payments, among other things. And you'd have to find out about that form on your own. Landlords and housing courts weren't required to tell tenants about it. Emily filled out
Because it would be massive, and by the time they could actually, execute it, the entire thing, it would have been over.
the form and brought it to her eviction hearing.
They didn't even ask for this declaration. They looked at my landlord and said, "What would you like to do?" And they, of course, said, "We would like to move forward with the eviction."
I talked about one of the reasons I was running the
In an interview on Snapchat in May, former Vice
The hell, an interview on Snapchat?
President Joe Biden said this.
There should be rent forgiveness and there should be mortgage forgiveness now.
Biden. Rent forgiveness? I don't think you... Okay, rent forgiveness isn't actually forgiveness, it's just the government taking your taxes and giving it to someone else. So let's say someone who is unemployed, still has to pay taxes. Well, least partial amount, but someone who's unemployed and doesn't have a house, they have to pay taxes to the government to pay for someone else's rent when they don't have to pay it, or someone who owns a house, or I don't know, someone on government welfare, and they can't afford to pay the rent of someone else. But when you tally this up to all the lost jobs, it becomes like that. And number two, what's stopping people from just saving that money?
Now, in the middle of this crisis.
Since then, some Democrats in Congress have put forward a rent and mortgage cancellation bill that would
That's an awful idea. Rent and mortgage cancellation bill?
accomplish what Biden...
Wait, do you understand what that means? Mortgages tend to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and rents... What's that supposed to even mean? You're forever going to go pay off someone's rent?
Biden described. It would relieve tenants of the burden of any rental debt accumulated during the pandemic. Instead, their landlords could apply for reimbursement from the federal government. As a longer-term fix to the affordable housing crisis, Biden has also proposed expanding vouchers that help people pay rent. Right now, about 5 million households receive the vouchers. Under Biden's plan, about 16 million would.
5 million? That's an increase of 11 million. That's more than double Biden.
Evictions don't affect all groups of Americans equally. Black and Latinx Americans are more.
Again, so you could. Well, this is because Black and Latinx, or Latino, as it's properly referred to in Latino language. They tend to be younger, and that means they tend to make less. And, well, you could argue racism, or you could just argue the average age of Black people and Latino people are just less, meaning they make less. If you're being redundant.
More likely than white Americans to rent, and more likely to be paid poverty wages for their work.
Poverty wages. I need to go do a video on that.
The CDC moratorium on evictions is set to expire on December 31st. After that, if nothing changes, millions of renters could be right back where they started.
That is a choice that we're making in our current historic moment.
Housing, he then says, housing is a human right, which, first of all, for you to get housing as a human right, literally the entire renting business, everyone who owns more than one house or is renting space to anyone would immediately have no gain in investment, flooding the market with extra houses, since, well, holding on to them would be a waste of time, making the housing thing useless for a little while.
We should really question why this is happening and reevaluate the idea of housing as a human right and how we can.
And then Locke shows a picture of a child, nice emotional manipulation. And then then they hold up signs saying "Stop mass evictions." There are no mass evictions. It's just, when people don't pay rent, it's not profitable enough to, keep them in the house.
We can put that into practice.
Also, you forget about literally every single tax. Let's continue. But what's your... Jesus. Are you doing enough to protect families from online... Okay. From online safeties? Oh god, it's sponsored by Allstate. No, we're not doing this. No, let's find some sort of thing. How black schools punish kids. Colorize. Wait. God damn it, Voxer. Do you have any channels? More channels? You do The Verge a lot. What the hell? Why do you do The Verge so much? Here, 1 second. Let me go find a good thing. Found another video. When voting rights don't protect all women.
For black women, the story of voting rights is a long one.
No, please help.
Very early.
Technically, it wouldn't be black women because women were given the right to vote before black people were. And even if so, women were given the right to vote, so that was like 100 years ago, so, yeah, I guess so.
Early on, at the dawn of the 19th century, they are already at work on a political philosophy that decries racism and sexism in American politics. But constitutionally speaking, it begins with the 15th Amendment because black women also need race to be an impermissible criteria there to get to the polls. Sojourner Truth is a name people might know, the former slave, anti-slavery activist, and women's rights activist. Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, poet, anti-slavery lecturer.
We also have figures like Nannie Helen Burroughs. Ida B. Wells was another major activist that people don't necessarily associate with the suffrage movement, but she absolutely was.
Black women never find a very comfortable home in women's suffrage associations. Racism is always present, sometimes in very pronounced ways.
We have pictures of parades, marches, women dressed up in sort of late 19th, early 20th century Victorian gear, hats, large hats, carrying signs about votes for women. And most of these images are of white women.
The key figures are a remarkable duo of women, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony.
Who could have guessed? Women got the right for women to vote.
And those two women will take us to the 19th Amendment. In August of 1920, the state of Tennessee will, by a mere one vote, ratify the 19th Amendment, an amendment that prohibits the states from using sex as a criteria for voting, and it will become part of the Constitution, and American women win the right to vote.
Oh my God, and that's where it should stop.
So for white women, it was the end of a long fight, but for many black women, it was just the beginning of an
Slavery was ended.
uphill battle to exercise those rights.
African American
You can always sue, right?
women are
But I guess you could say racism in the court, so whatever.
aware, but really everyone is aware that nothing in the 19th Amendment is going to prohibit individual states from continuing to disenfranchise
Get a pop filter.
black voters.
And so the first election that they had after the bill passed, the white women were going to vote, and we dressed up and went to vote. And when we got on there, well, we couldn't vote. They gave us all different kind of excuses why. We just stayed. We asked, we wanted to know why we couldn't vote, and the answers to the questions were so invalid, we were not satisfied. So finally one woman, Mrs. Simmons, said, "Are you saying that we can't vote because we are Negroes?" And he said, "Yes, Negroes don't vote in primary in Texas." So that just hurt our hearts real bad.
And so the 19th Amendment, even as we mark this anniversary, it leaves many, many American women to continue the struggle for political rights, including the vote. And African American women are one chapter or one facet of that story.
Yeah, okay, Vox. Sure. Vox, I like your message. But your message of this video is educational, it is not.
There's nothing in the 19th Amendment that guarantees Chinese immigrant women the vote. There's nothing in the 19th Amendment that guarantees to Native American women the vote. Latinx women.
The 19th Amendment wasn't about giving certain races the right to vote, it was about giving women the right to vote. There's a difference, Vox.
Particularly Mexican American women also occupy an ambiguous place in the story of voting rights. For Black women, the right to vote is symbolic, and that's not to diminish symbolism. It's to say that the right to vote is a sign that they are full and equal citizens of the United States. African American women are facing the challenges of racial violence, lynching, and access to the polls. African American women are looking at a range of inequalities, economic inequalities, housing inequalities, health inequalities, educational inequalities. And access to the ballot is a lever in those struggles. It is the gateway to sitting on juries. It is the gateway to office holding. Black women have an agenda, and it is an ambitious one, and one that they hope the vote will help them further.
It wasn't
easy to try to get people to come out to go and try to register to vote, because the first time that we went, we had a circle around the courthouse of pickup trucks and rifles and white people getting ready to stop us. Only 4 people got in that whole day.
What did the white people have to fear? from somebody lacks registering.
If they became a registered voter, many of the blacks would seek positions in the political field.
I feel Vox is going to go conflate this with, today, but I don't actually know.
They would be out. They would fight for justice if they were registered voters. They would turn the city completely around. And that is the reason why they did not want to see black people become registered voters.
What black women want in the wake of the 19th Amendment is federal legislation that will now protect their voting rights.
You don't have to put the word federal, just legislation.
To impose on those states with a history of disenfranchising black voters an extra requirement. And black women will wage a campaign that will take them all the way to 1965 and passage of the Voting Rights Act in that year. It's important to say that winning the Voting Rights Act is a brutal, brutal campaign. Black Americans, women and men, put their lives on the line.
That's a bit hyperbolic. And if you pull up the story of Rosie Parks, well, I do think it's tragic. Almost all of the people who were arrested in these protests and all the you have to sit in the back kind of things were never charged. They were just held in jail for a few hours and then released because they knew that they could never charge them.
In too many southern jurisdictions in order to force the hand of Congress, to force the hand of Lyndon Johnson to win voting rights legislation. This is not an easy road for African American women. It is a harrowing road, but it is indeed a victory, one that black women had been looking for nearly half a century.
Oh God, Vox. And, well, let's do this.
To her, even as she passed many years ago. People ask me, why do we need to know this history? Today, we live in an era of voter suppression.
Who could have guessed? Oh my God, Vox.
Laws that are neutral on their face.
Let me guess. Voter ID, purging certain votes, and I don't know what the third, if they're gonna include a third.
Voter ID requirements.
Who could have guessed?
Or the purging of voter roll.
2 for 2.
Or the shuttering of polling places.
Oh, God damn it.
None of which announce that they are aimed at keeping voters of color, women of color.
First of all, the voter ID is just a measurement to stop voter fraud. And you're like, well, we don't need it since there isn't any voter fraud. I wonder why. So, let's see. If you need a photo ID, it stops people from just walking up and saying, oh, hey, I'm this person, now let me vote for this person. It also stops dead people from voting.
Color from the polls, but when we look at those laws in practice, we can recognize
purging voter rolls. God, I don't remember who made this statement, but some leftist media organization made the statement that, oh, I know who it was. It was what's that? God damn it! It was shoot. The person ran for governor of Georgia, and she claimed it was rigged because of voter purging. Yeah, her crud, I can't think of her name, but for you to be purged in Georgia, you need to vote, or you need to not vote for 7 consecutive years. Not only that, you need to not respond to the U.S. government's letters, and even if you don't, you still have 2 years to respond. So you get 5 years, then 2 years, and then you're purged. And, well, in that case, you get to register to vote again. And, well, once you're no longer registered to vote, guess what? They'll send you another message saying you're no longer registered to vote, so you can go vote. Or so you can go register to vote again. Oh my god.
Recognize that, like in 1920,
In closing political polling places, early polling isn't a right, it's a privilege. You'll still have the availability to poll. It could be on November 3rd though, or whatever the day is the election.
in 2020, seemingly neutral laws are being used to disproportionately keep people of color away from the polls.
Prove it.
By running for political office and affecting change.
God, it's Stacey Abrams. Damn it. Oh, Ileana Presley. Jesus, I need to go do a video on you.
Change on the ground in their communities and in their states. So we now have Black women.
Stacey Abrams. Yeah, that bitch.
Running for governorships, and we have a number of African Americans that we've seen has shaped elections. So I think the idea of enfranchisement has also expanded to not just being able to vote, but exercising political power and exercising political agency. And I think that's the legacy of the suffrage movement.
Kamala Harris. Oh my god. Oh god, they put this 2020 Democratic Vice Presidential nominee. She's yeah, she is, but you're sounding like it was the will of the people. No, it was Joe Biden bowing down to Antifa.
These are not women who dropped out of the sky. These are women who come out of a political tradition and are building upon that, and will tell you that if you ask them.
These women and the generations that followed worked to make democracy and opportunity real in the lives of all of us who followed.
What the hell's this piano music, Vox? Okay, that's the end of the... How the U.S. counts votes. How much time we got? Let's do that one too. Let's end up with a bang. Let's do that. Ready? Let's go.
We all have our morning.
Oh, and I also forgot to mention absentee ballots. Ballots.
And lately, mine starts here, with an obsessive check on the status of my absentee ballot. Looks like the County Board of Elections received my ballot on October 27th, but it says they still need to process my voter ID envelope and verify the signature. Even before the coronavirus struck, more Americans each election were either voting early or voting by mail. But in 2020, these numbers are expected to skyrocket. The way Americans choose their president is complicated, even in a relatively normal election year.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. It's not supposed to be majority votes, because then a handful of cities could decide the president forever.
In 2020, voters are facing a pandemic, an underfunded postal service, and the closure of polling locations in battleground states like Georgia, Ohio, Arizona, and Texas. It's enough to...
And, well, I can say, well, this is true. That's because there's expected to be more people voting by mail, meaning you don't need as many polling locations.
Make you just want to tune out until it's over. But once you know how votes are counted, you can understand why.
God, this is gonna be criticizing the stupid, the Electoral College.
Yours counts. In most states, there are 4 ways Americans can vote. In person before Election Day, on Election Day, mailing an absentee ballot, or placing it in a secure drop box. Each of the more than 3,000 counties in the U.S. has its own rules, but voting in person generally looks something like this. When they show up to vote, election officials check each voter's name and address to make sure that they're registered and voting in the right place. These employees always work in teams of 2, and both workers can't be from the same political party. Voters cast their ballots in private, either by filling out a paper ballot or using an electronic voting machine.
Well, who could have guessed? Can't be seen from the same political party, avoiding corruption, voting in private, meaning there shouldn't be any interference. Wow, this seems pretty streamlined and pretty good so far.
Election officials collect the completed paper ballot. They check the voter's name off a list and then place the ballot in a secure box. At polling sites with electronic voting machines, a computer records two separate pieces of information: the voter's name and the date they voted, and their vote choices. Separating names and vote choices ensures that voters' preferences stay secret. The machine also prints out a receipt with just that first piece of information. Election officials check the voter's name off a list and place the receipt in a secure box.
Still seems a very, very, very secure and, well, trustworthy.
Step 1 of the process looks pretty much the same, whether you're voting early or on election day. For those voting absentee, it looks a little different. In some states, every single registered voter gets an absentee ballot in the mail. But in most states, voters have to fill out a request form like this one to get a ballot mailed to them. Once they fill out their ballot, voters can either mail it to the County Board of Elections, drop it off in person, or place it in an official ballot drop box. Before they can be counted, absentee ballots have to go through an extra step: verification. Election officials, always working in those bipartisan teams, scan the sealed envelopes into a computer system. Next, they check the signature on the ballot envelope against the signature in the state's voter registration database. In Missouri, voters also need to get their ballot envelopes stamped and signed by a notary public. Other states require a witness signature. If an envelope is missing one of those requirements, the whole ballot is invalid.
Wow, it's almost like security measures are in place because, guess what, right? Because this way is more likely to have fraud.
Most states start this whole verifying process weeks before Election Day. But Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, two crucial battleground states, don't start verifying mail-in ballots until Election Day. Another one, Michigan, doesn't start until the day before. Once the envelopes are verified, election officials unseal them and store the ballots in a secure box until it's time to start counting. All paper ballots, both from absentee and in-person voting, are tabulated using a machine. The data is stored on a memory card, and the counted ballots go back in their secure box. Election officials combine the counts from the paper ballots and the electronic voting machines, and the individual polling places report these numbers to the County Board of Elections, which reports them to the State Board of Elections. At both the county and the state level, members of one political party can't have a majority on these boards. On Election Day, polling places and county boards are continually counting and reporting new numbers every hour or so.
Still seems pretty secure and safe and good.
State boards of elections typically post the counts online after the polls close and keep updating them as more numbers come in. It takes a while for all these votes to be counted, sometimes hours, sometimes days. When you hear this on TV on election night,
and look at all these wins we're projecting for Hillary Clinton.
That doesn't mean all the votes in that state have been counted. News networks make projections based on a certain percentage of votes, and they don't always get it right.
A big call to make. CNN announces that we call Florida in the Al Gore column.
Stand by. CNN right now is moving our earlier declaration of Florida back to the too close to call column.
News networks make a lot of money marketing election night like it's the Super Bowl. But there's something to be said for adjusting our expectations a little, especially during a pandemic. After all, the law in most states gives state boards of elections weeks to make sure that their vote counts are complete and accurate before certifying them as official. I'm going to keep checking up on my ballot every morning and reminding my friends to do the same. But on election night, I'd rather leave the projections to the pundits and rest up. Democracy is a marathon.
Wow. Oh, Jesus. Okay, end the video, bye.